You don't need it anyway, Claire said with a shrill, smug laugh that echoed across the phone. I mean, I'm getting married and you're still single, so at least the money will go towards something meaningful. With my fingertips tracing the sleek edge of my mahogany desk, I reclined in my office chair. She said something that made my stomach turn. Somehow, my sister had taken $100,000 out of my personal money. As simple as that. I nearly laughed at the irony. I said calmly, "Enjoy your day, Claire," and hung up. Although I spoke calmly, anger was simmering beneath the surface. I'm Emma Sinclair, and I've discovered that the best kind of retaliation is achievement at the age of 32. I was quietly creating an empire over the past 10 years, while Claire enjoyed the blind favoritism of our parents. Sinclair Gardens was the most popular wedding location in Connecticut, so it wasn't just any venue. And nobody knew I had it, not even my family. My office windows let in afternoon light, which illuminated the trophies on my walls. They were all gained in the name of my business, but never in my name. I was only a mediocrely successful event planner in the eyes of the world. They were unaware that I owned 3 additional prestigious locations in New England, in addition to Sinclair Gardens. I launched my banking application. Claire wasn't playing a bluff. Over the preceding week, my funds, the only account my family was aware of, had been steadily depleted. This morning, the last withdrawal was processed. Wedding fund was the line of the memo. Regards, sis. I looked up at the sharp click of heels on hardwood. My closest friend and venue manager, Sarah, entered with a stiff expression. She closed the door behind her. "I just got the alert about Claire's deposit," she remarked. "Did she seriously steal your money to book Sinclair Gardens?" The first pulled up the booking system and nodded. There it was, a $50,000 down payment, paid completely out of pocket, for the entire luxury package. "She always did have expensive taste," I whispered, my throat beginning to get harsh. "Though I guess it's easier when you're spending someone else's money." Sarah crossed her arms and sat on the edge of my desk. "How the hell did she even get into your account, Mom?" I felt my gut clench. She's still a cosigner from when I opened it in college. They must have gone to the bank together. It was just another chapter in Claire's life of getting what she wanted at my expense, so the treachery wasn't new. Claire had been the golden child, but I had been the responsible oldest, the straight A student, the one who assisted with the family business. Her potential served as the yardstick for all of my accomplishments. Every success faded because I wouldn't overshadow her. As she reached for her phone, Sarah questioned, "You're going to fight this, right?" "I can call the bank," I interrupted her by raising a hand. "No, not yet. Already a plan was taking shape. Let's see what else they have in mind." My mother texted me and my phone buzzed. "You heard the fantastic news from Claire. At Sinclair Gardens, she and Adam are having their ideal wedding. Isn't it amazing? Next week, we will meet with the venue owner to complete the arrangements. Will you assist with the planning? For your sister, it's the least you can do." I showed the text to Sarah. Her gaze expanded. In a whisper, she said, "They don't know?" I scrolled to Claire's client file and said, "Nope." Her reservation was marked as a high-value event for my evaluation. And for now, let's keep it that way. The following hour was devoted to going over Claire's expansive concept in detail. She had gone all out, with a gourmet 7-course dinner, imported flowers, and a champagne fountain. The entire bill? A little less than $100,000. It was nearly identical to what she took from me. Sarah moaned. "She's going to be unbearable at the planning meeting, actually." I smiled slowly after saying it. "I won't be at the meeting." Sarah's forehead raised. "As far as they know, I'm just the sister of the bride. You'll be handling everything as the venue manager." Her eyes glowed. "And you? Conveniently unavailable. Family emergency abroad. Very tragic." I started typing my mother a reply. "Of course. I'm really glad for Claire. I'm excited to see Sinclair Gardens because I've heard it's stunning. Genuine weddings, genuine brides, and real events that truly mattered filled the remainder of the day. I ignored the pain of betrayal and threw myself into my work. Later, there would be time for emotions. I had to concentrate immediately. My phone rang again as I was leaving that evening. My dad, "Emma," he started, his voice laden with that well-known sadness. "Your mother says you're being difficult about Claire's wedding. I just said I was happy for her." "Don't act foolish," he sighed. Claire needs that money more than you do. You're established, successful. She's just starting out. This wedding means everything to her. I didn't miss the irony of him referring to me as successful when he knew nothing about my real accomplishments. Dad, she took my entire savings without asking. That's theft, he clarified. It's family, as though that made everything okay. And family supports each other. Claire has always looked up to you, even if you don't see it. The least you can do is help make her special day perfect. I recalled the young girl who used to follow me around and aspire to be like me by wearing my clothes. At some point, appreciation had turned into entitlement. You're right, I finally said. Family is important. I'll do everything I can to make sure Claire's wedding is exactly what she deserves. His voice was instantly relieved. That's my girl. I knew you'd understand. And don't worry about the money once Adam's business takes off, I'm sure they'll pay you back. Knowing it would never happen, I hung up the phone. Like Claire, Adam had big aspirations, no money, and a constant search for someone else to pay. Sarah came back with a Coke. It was dinner, she said. I think you could use a drink and some plotting time. An hour later, we were enjoying a bottle of red wine together at our favorite wine bar. Sarah leaned in after taking a sip. So, what's the real plan? Because I know you're not letting them get away with this. I saw the wine splatter on the sides of my glass as I swirled it. Did you know Sinclair Gardens has a strict payment policy? Full balance due 60 days before the event. No exceptions. Sarah's eyes got bigger. And Claire's wedding is in? Exactly 90 days, I announced. Her smile widened. So they have less than a month to come up with the rest? Precisely. I put down my drink. And since they already spent my money on the deposit, they'll have to scramble for the rest. I retrieved the contract Claire had signed without reading it and said, and if they can't pay? Clause 23B states that in the event of non-payment, the venue reserves the right to cancel the event and retain all deposits as liquidated damages. Sarah had the most evil smile. And they won't find another venue this close to peak season, will they? Not one like Sinclair Gardens. She lifted her glass. To Claire's dream wedding. May it be everything she deserves. I felt lighter than I had felt all day when I clinked my glass to hers. Claire had taken without repercussions for years, protected by our parents' unquestioning adoration. However, this time, she was going to discover that aspirations come with a cost this time. And she was going to pay it in 3 months. A week went by more quickly than I had anticipated. I sat in my Sinclair Gardens office and glanced out the one-way glass above the consultation room at my family. As if she weren't sitting in my venue, using my stolen money to organize a wedding, Claire had already claimed the antique French sofa as if it were her own kingdom. She was looking through her phone with one leg crossed over the other. My father lingered close by, obviously uncomfortable, while our mother sat next to her, fiddling with Claire's hair. He was undoubtedly already mentally calculating the figures, wondering how in the world they were going to find the remaining $50. Oh, the owner's running a bit behind, Sarah said as she walked in, assuming her position with ease. She was carrying a silver tray filled with flutes of champagne. She sends her sincerest apologies and hopes you'll enjoy some refreshments while you wait. Late? Claire sneered, her tone tinged with annoyance. Doesn't she know who I am? This is completely unprofessional. Sarah's face stayed composed. She had a family emergency overseas, but I assure you, I've been personally assigned to handle every detail. You're in excellent hands. With scarcely disguised calculating, our mother took a flute as her keen eyes scanned the opulent space. As long as everything is perfect for Claire's big day. We've heard such glowing things about Sinclair Gardens. Only the best, my father said, although it was clear that he was uncomfortable. Sarah started talking about the wedding specifics. Centerpieces made of imported crystal, a chef with a Michelin star, a famous DJ. Every treat was painstakingly chosen, and their costs gradually increased. Claire became more and more excited with each lavish affirmation, but every minute that went by made my father look paler. Sarah said, and now, regarding the remaining balance, in a courteous yet businesslike manner. As she waved her hand dismissively, Claire said, Oh, that's not a problem. Daddy will handle it. Right, Daddy? The security stream allowed me to zoom in on my father's face. That flash of uneasiness was there. He swallowed forcefully, his throat bobbling. Actually, sweetheart, he replied slowly. I wanted to discuss that. Business has been challenging. I might need a little more time beyond the 60-day deadline. Sarah maintained her composure. I'm so sorry, but our policy is strict. The full balance is due 60 days before the event, or we'll have to cancel and retain the deposit. It's all outlined in the contract you signed. Cancel? Claire sprang to her feet, forgetting her champagne. You can't cancel! This is my wedding! Do you have any idea who we are? I understand your concern, Sarah said with ease, but this policy applies to all our clients. If we don't receive payment, we have a wait list of eager couples who would love your date. The fissures were developing. My father was constantly looking at his phone, most likely mentally recalculating the figures. My mom's self-assured smile wavered, and Claire was doing what she did best, which was to put her imagination ahead of reality. When they were gone, Sarah walked into my office and fell onto the couch, grinning broadly. That was some fun, she thought. I raised an eyebrow. Claire's not backing down. Oh, absolutely not. Did you know she wants a live elephant at the reception? I squinted. Please tell me you quoted her a price, 15 grand, plus insurance and permits. I whistled when I displayed the running total on my screen, $175,000. That's quite a dream wedding. Using my money. Sarah bent over. I dug into your father's finances. His company's worse off than we thought. Mass layoffs. Whispers of bankruptcy. My chest constricted. Does Claire know? Sarah gave a snort. Claire? She's still charging designer clothes to their credit cards. I doubt she's ever glanced at a bank statement. It buzzed on my phone. Claire texted, There's no negotiating the elephant. My dress fitting tomorrow will also take place in your former room at Mom and Dad's. I cleared all of your belongings, so don't worry. You don't really need it anyhow. I gazed at the message, feeling a familiar mixture of resignation and incredulity. She cleared out my childhood room. Sarah narrowed her eyes and leaned over my shoulder. Most people would have snapped by now, called the cops, exposed everything, I said. Patience is a virtue, as my fingers clenched around my phone. Besides, I said with a chilly smile, I have a better idea. Tell me, I retrieved the contracts with the vendors. Over the next hour, we're going to refine my plan. How? Every vendor working Claire's wedding owes me favors. A few calls will ensure they all play their roles flawlessly. Sarah's smile widened. You're going to let her think she's getting her dream wedding, right up until the moment it falls apart. The weeks that followed blended into the planning for the wedding. Claire insisted on seeing Sarah every day, which added even more extravagant touches. Fireworks. A release of butterflies, a famous DJ. Claire stayed blissfully apart while the budget continued to soar into crazy. Then it occurred precisely 61 days before to the wedding. Refused. The air was broken by Claire's shriek. Eyes burning, she brandished her credit card at Sarah. Try it again, Sarah calmly stated. I apologize, but all 3 cards have been declined. And as per our contract, the full balance is due tomorrow. This is ridiculous! Daddy, do something! My father appeared little and stooped. Sweetheart, I tried to tell you. The business, we don't have the money. Quiet. Heavy. Define. Claire said. What do you mean you don't have the money? In a threatening whisper. This is my wedding. My perfect day. You promised. Maybe Emma could help, my mother frantically said. She has savings, Claire yelled. I already took her savings. That's what paid the deposit. My dad's head snapped up. You what? Claire gave an eye roll. Oh, like you didn't know. Mom helped me. It's not like Emma needs it. My father's face changed from one of surprise to one of silent rage. He looked at my mom. You helped her steal from Emma? It wasn't stealing, my mom feigned. We just borrowed it for Claire's happiness. Emma understands. My dad peered at me through the window. This time, though, his eyes were humiliated rather than merely contrite. Sarah said, You have until 5:00 p.m. tomorrow, with firmness. After that, your date will be released. But the deposit, Claire said in a panicked, piercing voice. Sarah remarked, The contract is clear. All deposits are non-refundable. Claire stormed out as the meeting came to a conclusion, and my mother chased after her. My father was still there, looking at the document blankly. I eventually entered the consultation room after they had departed. The scent of desperation was still present in the air, along with remnants of Claire's perfume. Well, that was intense, observed Sarah. Tracing the lipstick stain on the rim of Claire's abandoned champagne glass, I scooped it up. It's not over yet. Sarah's eyebrows went up. They can't pay. The wedding's off? Isn't that what you wanted? My face broke into a slow smile. What I want is for Claire to learn that actions have consequences. And tomorrow at 5:00 p.m., I added, putting down the glass, that lesson begins. The sky was clear the following morning, making it the ideal day for devastation. I sneaked through the private entrance that went around the main office and got to Sinclair Gardens early. Sarah was already at her desk, going over the previous night's surveillance footage in a methodical manner. With her fingers moving through the recordings from the morning, Sarah told me, "Your sister has been calling nonstop." She swung the screen in my direction. On the feed, Claire was seen outside the venue at 6 in the morning with her hair tangled and mascara running down her cheeks. Despite the muted audio, her mouth was moving wildly as she pounded on the barred doors. I inquired, "Any word from my parents?" When Sarah said, "Your father called once." Very professional. Apologetic. "Requested an appointment with the owner at 4:30 today." She paused. "He sounded different." I responded, "Good," as I adjusted the charcoal gray jacket I had selected for the day. The authority that the outfit conveyed was ideal for the situation that was about to unfold. I kept an eye on my family's increasing despair throughout the day. Claire went back 3 more times, each time becoming more agitated. In a desperate attempt to get extensions, my mother called suppliers. They all graciously rejected, as I had instructed. My father showed up by himself at 4:30. He appeared to be exhausted, the sort of fatigue brought on by restless nights and the gradual understanding that you finally reached a breaking point. I said to Sarah, "Show him to my office. It's time." I saw Sarah guide him into the owner's office, which is my office, via the security stream. His eyes strayed to the framed honors on the walls, the certificates with my name on them, and the pictures of me with business titans. Through the private door, I entered. I said, "Mr. Sinclair," in a level voice. "Thank you for coming." He turned, bewilderment giving way to incredulity. His voice broke. "Emma, you own Sinclair Gardens?" I pointed to the chair and remarked, "Among other things, with ease. Please sit." He continued to stare at me as he slipped into the chair. "How long?" I said. 5 years. Sinclair Gardens was my first venue. Now I have 3 others, plus a management company and a consulting firm. 5 years, he said again in a hollow voice. "We thought, you assumed," I said, "that I was struggling, that I needed your guidance. That's what you wanted to believe." Sarah's voice crackled over the intercom before he could reply. "Mr. and Miss S. Sinclair are here. Claire is with them. They're insisting on seeing the owner." My father's eyes met mine. "Should we invite them in?" After he paused, he nodded. "They need to see this." The door exploded. Our mother followed closely behind Claire, her face tensed with artificial calm. Claire frantically looked around the room and yelled, "Where's the owner? We need to speak to the owner right now." My response was, "You already are." They went cold. "No," said Claire in a whisper. "No, this is a joke. You can't. Sinclair Gardens has been mine for 5 years," I said, "along with 3 other venues, a management company, and a consulting firm. If you'd ever paid attention to anything other than yourselves, you'd know that." Our mother's face went white as she fell into a chair. "But how?" "Because while you were all fixated on Claire's potential, I was building something real. Every time you dismissed my achievements, every time you drained my accounts for Claire's latest whim, I was growing stronger. And you never even noticed." "This is unfair," exclaimed Claire. "You let me plan my wedding here. You let me sign those contracts knowing what?" I interrupted her. "That you stole from me? That you signed contracts without reading them? That you never once considered the consequences of your actions? I needed that money for my wedding." "No, Claire. You wanted it. There's a difference." I placed the financial documents on the desk after taking them out. Just like you wanted my college fund, my childhood room, every last thing you've taken. Tears filled our mother's eyes. Emma, please. We're family. Surely we can work this out, family. I asked with a sardonic laugh. You think this is about family? Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't enable this level of entitlement. Anger twisted Claire's face. You can't do this! I'm your sister. Exactly, I responded, stiffening my voice. And that should have meant something to you before you took from me. I turned to face my dad. And before you helped her do it. My dad's mouth parted, then shut again. He drooped his shoulders. You're right, he muttered. We failed you, Emma. But we failed Claire too, by never teaching her consequences. Daddy! Claire exclaimed, feeling deceived. No, princess, he answered, his voice worn out. This stops now. We can't pay for your wedding. We can't fix this. And for once you'll have to accept that. Claire balled her hands into fists. What about the deposit? That's Emma's money. Sarah moved forward with a clipboard in her hand. The contract is clear, she stated calmly when speaking. Full payment was due by 5:00 p.m. If payment isn't received, the event is canceled and the deposit is forfeited. Behind me, the clock reached 5 o'clock. My words were, time's up. Sarah gave me the documents. I signed it with purposeful accuracy. The contract is void. The deposit is forfeit. The date has already been released to a client on the wait list. Claire's knees gave way. Sobbing, she collapsed on the ground. My father stood motionless, seeing me with fresh eyes while our mother hurried to her side. Quietly, he remarked, You've built something remarkable. I have, I concurred. No thanks to any of you. Claire's eyes were puffy and red. She gasped. What happens now? Now? I asked with a faint smile. Now you learn about consequences. Claire's mouth quivered. I can't afford to pay you back. I took out a folder and slid it across the desk, saying, Oh, but you will. My lawyers have already drafted a repayment plan. You'll pay back every penny. With interest. Claire's jaw dropped open in disapproval. And you can start, I continued, by getting a job. Her eyes became wide with fear. A job? Yes, Claire, a job. You know that thing people do to earn money instead of stealing it? I laughed. The cafe down the street is hiring. Lovely view of Sinclair Gardens. You can watch other brides have their dream weddings while you earn back what you stole. Her horrified expression was nearly worth the money. They were escorted out by security. As they dragged Claire through the door, her tears continued. With hollow assurances in her ear, my mother trailed behind. My dad paused for a second longer, staring at me. When he said, I know it's too late for apologies, he spoke quietly, but I'm proud of what you've built. I'm sorry we never saw it before. I didn't answer. I did nothing but watch him go. Sarah came back with 2 glasses of champagne after they had left. Well, she handed me a drink and said, That was satisfying. I clattered my glass to hers, to consequences. The words, to consequences, she repeated. Sarah looked at me for a while. Was keeping this secret all these years worth it? I imagined Claire's expression as she recognized the person in charge. Some lessons, I replied, are worth waiting for. Claire's texting finally stopped 3 days after the fallout. She had been predictable in the first wave, angry, dramatic, accusing me of breaking her wedding and ruining her life. When that failed, she resorted to guilt-tripping, asking, How could you do this to me? We're sisters. Then the pleading began. Just help me sort this out, Emma. I promise that I will reimburse you. And there was stillness after I disregarded those. I didn't overlook it. Sarah entered my office at Sinclair Gardens with a smug look on her face, as I was finishing up the last details for a high-profile wedding that was taking place that weekend. Guess who just got a job? I put my tablet down and looked up. Claire? Sarah smiled. She starts at the cafe tomorrow. Minimum wage. Part-time. And according to my source, aka, the manager, she's already complained about the uniform. I folded my arms and reclined in my chair. Good. She's not above real work. Swirling the Coke in her hand, Sarah sat on the couch's arm. Your mom stopped by this morning, too. Didn't ask to see you, just wanted to confirm the final cancellation for Claire's wedding. I arched an eyebrow. And? Sarah shrugged and said, And she looked rough, like reality is starting to set in. About time. Sarah's eyes narrowed in contemplation. You think Claire will stick with the job? I gave a small smile. She doesn't have a choice. The repayment plan is legally binding. Nevertheless, Sarah stated, extending her legs, she could have simply declined to work and allowed your parents to tidy up the mess. Not this time. My gaze became piercing. Dad's done enabling her. He's the one who signed the repayment contract. Claire pays or she's in breach. And your dad's really standing by it? I paused before saying, seems like it. He's different lately. Sarah's eyebrows went up. Different how? He's been checking in more. Calling. He even asked for my advice on restructuring his business last week. Sarah's mouth twisted. Imagine that. Him actually seeing you as an adult. It's strange, I acknowledged. But not bad. The moment was interrupted by the sound of my phone vibrating. When I picked it up, my dad texted me, Emma, hello. Can we get together tomorrow for lunch? I want to speak. I looked at it for a while. Sarah said, you gonna go? Saying, I think so. She grinned. Progress. I went to a quiet downtown Italian restaurant the following day to meet my dad. When I got there, he was already sitting with a glass of water in front of him. As I got closer, he stood and said, Emma. His smile was cautious but sincere. Thanks for coming. What's this about? I asked, placing my suitcase next to me as I sat down. Rubbing the back of his neck, he paused. I've been thinking about things. The way we've treated you. How much we missed. I didn't answer. He let out a sigh. He looked down at his hands and said, we underestimated you. And I'm not just talking about Sinclair Gardens. When you left for college, I thought you were making a mistake. Thought you'd fail without us. My voice was flat as I said, you were wrong. His eyes met mine and he said, I know. And I'm sorry. I wasn't prepared to give him such a light sentence. It wasn't just you, Dad. Mom encouraged Claire to steal from me. She helped her. And you both stood by and watched while Claire walked all over me for years. I know, he muttered. And you were right to make her pay it back. I looked closely at him. So you're really not going to help her? He gave a head shake. Claire's almost 30. If she wants to live like an adult, it's time she acts like one. And Mom? He let out a sigh. She's struggling with it. But I told her no more handouts. I didn't believe it in part. Not quite yet. However, I desired to. We discussed his business for the remainder of our lunch. In order to restructure their supply chain, he requested for my opinion. When I spoke, he did listen. I was unable to recall the last time that had occurred. We were heading out when he stopped by the door. Emma, he said, I meant what I said. I'm proud of you. My chest constricted. Thanks. And dinner on Sunday? Mom's actually cooking. I grinned. I'll think about it. Sarah tapped on the doorframe when I was working late that night at Sinclair Gardens. Thought you'd want to see this. She gave her phone to me. A Google review of the cafe appeared on the screen. Waitress was polite, but seemed distracted, kept looking out the window at the wedding venue across the street. Coffee was good, though. 4 stars. I chuckled to myself. Claire? Sarah gave a nod. Yup. My source says she showed up on time, actually smiled at a customer, and didn't quit after her first shift. Dryly, miracles do happen, I said. And guess who's watching the Johnson wedding from the cafe window right now? I looked at the big bay window that looked out over the space. I saw Claire, wearing a black apron, standing behind the counter across the street. She was observing the bridal party, laughing and snapping photos on the grass, with her hair tied into an untidy ponytail and a detached attitude. Sarah observed. She's not throwing a tantrum. She's just watching. I folded my arms and sat back. Good. Let her watch. Sarah's grin widened. Karma's a bitch. I squinted my eyes and said, not karma, just consequences. Dinner on Sunday came sooner than I thought. At precisely 6, I pulled into my folks' driveway. With a timid smile, my mother opened the door. Emma, I'm so glad you came. 4 people were seated in the dining room. Claire was standing by the sideboard, arranging the dishes, and my dad was already seated. She looked at me for a moment, and then looked away. Hey! She uttered rigidly. I took a seat across from her and said, Hey! It was a rather ordinary meal. In fact, my mom had prepared actual food. Lasagna, bread with garlic dot salad, no caterers, absent. Only dinner. Claire didn't complain, but she also didn't say much. My dad cleared his throat after the meal. Emma, Claire has something to say. Claire gave him a stern glance. He looked at her warily. Claire's mouth clenched. Then she let out a sigh. She whispered, I won Employee of the Month. Congratulations, I blurted out. She went on, and I made my first payment last week. It's not a lot, but I'm trying. I know. There was silence for a beat between us. Claire finally muttered, I'm sorry, in a voice that was almost audible above a whisper, for everything. I observed her. She appeared worn out. This time, however, her eyes were filled with quiet resignation rather than rage, saying, You stole from me. That's not something I'll forget. I know. But you're paying it back, I said. That's a start. Claire gave a nod. I'm working on it. My dad gave me a small smile. Baby steps, he commented. I didn't return the smile. However, I gave a nod. Claire paused. I bought dessert. She went to the neighborhood bakery and took out a plastic container. Brownies. Her words, with my own money, came out swiftly. I kept hearing Sarah say, Miracles do happen. I grabbed a brownie and chewed into it. Not bad. Claire's gaze grew softer. It wasn't pardon. Not quite yet. However, it was something. 3 months later, on what should have been Claire's special day, I watched the Johnson wedding unfold from my office in Sinclair Gardens. The ceremony went smoothly. The bride was radiant, and the celebration without elephants was in full swing. The nighttime air was filled with the sound of clinking glasses and laughter as the grounds were illuminated by fairy lights. Everything was in its proper place. On my desk, my phone buzzed. Sarah texted, Your sister's watching from the cafe again. I made my way to the window that looked out onto the street. Claire wore her black apron and stood behind the cafe counter, across from the venue. She had pulled her hair back into a tight ponytail. She wasn't giving a glare. She wasn't pouting. She was merely observing. I looked at her for a while. From behind me, Sarah's voice stated, This time, she's not attempting to sneak in. I gave a small smile. She wouldn't dare. Sarah moved to stand next to me and gave me a champagne glass. She's not bad at the job, you know. Got a pretty decent tip yesterday. Employee of the month, too. Scary, isn't it? Terrifying, I remarked sardonically as I sipped my champagne. Sarah looked at Claire's image in the window. You think she's actually learning? She's showing up every day. I observed Claire leaning on the counter and looking out the window at the wedding party with her chin in her palm. She's not running away this time. Progress, Sarah's words were. Baby steps. I looked out the window. Did you finalize the schedule for next weekend's wedding? Sarah's eyes lit up as she said, Yep, and don't worry, no elephants involved. I put down the drink and looked at the clock, saying, Shame. Think I'll take a walk through the gardens. Sarah smiled. You just want to see Claire's face when the fireworks go off. Maybe. I went outside to enjoy the refreshing evening breeze. Soft sunshine and the chatter of contented guests filled the gardens. The reception hall reverberated with the sound of string instruments. On my way to the cafe, I crossed the street. When Claire saw me enter, her eyes were wide. She said, Hey, with caution, hey. She used a towel to clean her hands. Need a coffee? I leaned on the counter and said, I'm good. Busy tonight? She looked to the window and said, Steady. They look happy. They are. Claire's mouth pushed shut. I guess that should have been me. Yeah, I replied, but it's not. Her eyes grew gloomy. You really weren't going to let me go through with it? Nope. You would have actually canceled the wedding? I did cancel the wedding. Claire let out a sigh. Yeah, guess you did. I kept a close eye on her. Her eyes were not furious, but they were exhausted, simply accepting. According to her, I made another payment this week, used my tip money. I know. She wrapped her hand around the counter's edge. It's not going to make much of a dent. You've got time. Claire paused. And if I can't pay it all back, then you'll work harder. She twitched her mouth. Right. Teenagers entered and made their way to the pastry case. Claire sat up straight, effortlessly transitioning into work mode. Her words were, I should get back to it. Yeah. Claire's words halted me as I turned to go. Emma? I looked back. With hesitation, she parted her lips. Thanks for not letting me get away with it. I gave a small smile. Don't thank me yet. Sunday dinner started to exist, often enough, but not every week. My mom started cooking, really cooking. Although they weren't flawless, the meals were good. Lasagna roasts. She even made pot pie herself once. After her shift at the cafe, Claire would typically come last, her hair still pinned up and her coffee-scented scent wafting across the air. She sat beside me, initially silent but then contributing to the discussion. Dad talked about his job and how the company's reorganization was beginning to pay off. He even requested me to assist him in finding a new manager of operations. Mom discussed how the new management was stabilizing the boutique. She didn't have to, but she chose not to bring up the mayhem that had come before it. For the most part, Claire listened. Occasionally, though, she would make a snarky remark that caused Mom to frown and Dad to laugh. It felt typical. Claire remained Claire, still has rights, still a bit pampered. The edges, however, were now softer. She stopped requesting money. She wasn't prepared for handouts. And she never complained when she arrived to work at the cafe each morning. Well, hardly much of a complaint. About 2 months after the fallout, I went to the cafe one afternoon. Claire was concentrating on the espresso machine behind the bar. A young woman in a fitted suit was standing at the register, tapping anxiously on her phone. Claire smiled brightly and professionally as she gave out the coffee. Here you go. Have a great day. The woman grabbed the cup without even looking up. Thanks. Claire's smile remained unwavering. You're welcome. Half of the coffee spilled down the woman's top as she bumped with a server as she turned to go. Are you kidding me? With composure, Claire gave her a stack of napkins. Accidents happen. Let me get you another one. Despite her frown, the woman accepted the napkins. Claire didn't even roll her eyes as she turned to face the machine. I leaned against the counter when the woman left. Who are you, and what have you done with my sister? Claire gave a snort. Turns out customer service isn't that hard. Wow. Character development. Despite herself, Claire smiled and said, Shut up. I took out an envelope from within my backpack. What's that? I slid it across the bar and said, Your next repayment. Claire's grin dimmed. I can't accept that, you're not. You're paying me back. Slowly, but steadily, Claire took the packet in her hands and flipped it over. She then put it in the pocket of her apron. I'm not going to stop working at the cafe, she replied. I didn't expect you to. Her eyes become piercing. I'm still going to pay you back. I know. She paused. You're really not going to make this easy on me, are you? Why would I? Claire sighed. You suck. And yet I remarked, Here we are. Claire's lips quirked. 3 months turned into 6, then 9. Claire reimbursed the $100,000 in full. Even though it took her almost a year, she succeeded. A handwritten message accompanied her most recent payment. Emma, it is insufficient to just apologize. Now I am aware of that. Even though I didn't deserve it, I appreciate that you persisted in believing in me. I don't think we'll get along. However, I hope that one day you will regard me as someone who is striving, rather than as the sister who stole from you. I appreciate you making this difficult. Claire, I slipped the note inside my desk drawer after folding it. Claire received a promotion at the cafe a year after the controversy. She enrolled in business programs at the nearby college a month later. Her tuition was self-funded. She even began dating one of the cafe patrons. He seemed like a decent man. Despite his lack of wealth, he worked hard. In fact, Claire appeared to be joyful. Dad's business steadied. Mom's boutique began to make a modest but steady profit. Sarah and I added a second facility in Vermont to Sinclair Gardens. Claire, too? Claire continued to work, continued to appear, continued to study. I visited the cafe one afternoon. Claire was delivering change to a customer at the register. She grinned at the sight of me. Coffee? Yeah. On the house? Nice try. Claire smiled. Worth a shot. After accepting the coffee, I turned to face the door. Claire's voice interrupted me, Emma. I glanced behind me. Her words were, Thanks for not giving up on me. I grinned. Would have been easier. Claire's eyes grew luminous, but not as satisfying. Exactly. The sound of her laughter followed me out of the cafe. It takes effort to learn some lessons. Repayment of certain debts takes time, but occasionally they are worthwhile.